You would have seen what Henry was just talking about there. How much of that excites you as an investor, potential investor?
Potentially a lot. We've looked at the space in quite a bit of detail. We've actually had a couple of enclosed environment ag companies on the platform. We've mainly decided to focus on the technology that is underpinning these systems. We think that's a better sort of venture space to be pursuing. Aero farms, freight farms, those guys that are getting money, they're doing very, very well, and I think there's enormous legs in the sector. The local food, growing fresh, supplying fresh is going to be the future.
Henry, I know you can grab that microphone if you like, or just grab the Rockstar mic. I need to ask you, because I'm dumb at this, right? And I got the basics of it, but honestly, hopefully I asked this question on behalf of other people as well. What is the difference between aquaponics, aeroponics, and hydroponics? Does anybody else need to know, or am I just the only person? Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, because they sound similar, except for the aero bit, but what's the exact difference between those, and why were so much of an issue with cost on R&D on that last company?
Sure. Yeah, so aeroponics and aquaponics are both forms of hydroponics, where water is the main driver in delivery of nutrients and oxygen for the plant. So hydroponics is the more, let's say, basic, less risky approach. There's a number of hydroponic methods. Let's start with aeroponics. Aeroponics is very precision-based. It's when you miss the roots of the plant on intervals. So imagine a plant that's essentially hooked up to an IV. It's getting everything it needs when it needs. That's a great way to grow the plants quickly and efficiently. It saves a lot more water than the other approaches as well. But it's also very risky. There's some data that suggests it's got a lower shelf life as a result of being that controlled. And also, if your power goes out, you don't have any water that the plants are in. And so there's really a lot of risk of losing a significant number of your crop. Aquaponics is where you have fish that produce waste, and that waste is then filtered and creates the nutrient solution for a hydroponic system. So that's really great because it has the potential to be a highly sustainable form of agriculture. But I've only seen it perform well in a few settings, one being small demonstration settings, school settings, or large-scale greenhouses in warm climates. You see them working quite well in parts of Africa, the Southeast Asia, and India. But in the US, you see a number of large-scale commercial aquaponic facilities that fail simply because it's very difficult as an operator to produce healthy fish and healthy plants at the same time. Usually one of the systems is suffering.
So you're literally also doing aquaculture and farming fish at the same time as
Exactly.
well. Yeah. A lot of this, Frans, is driven by, a lot of what we've seen is driven by the technology as such. Now, you were talking right down to nanotechnology in some of the examples. When does technology become the driver for agriculture, or what we're seeing within these horticultural innovations, versus the actual growth of the plant itself?
Well, is my mic?
Yeah, you're good.
I don't think nanotechnology is a driver. Nanotechnology is a technology that facilitates specific developments. So it's a facilitator, and it's up to the engineers to make the combination of demands in a certain sector, in this case the agricultural food sector, and the technology, what the opportunities that the technology can provide. These worlds are far apart, so that is the difference. A nanotechnologist doesn't know what the demands are for in agri-technology or in food, and the agri-technology and food scientist doesn't know what is happening in nanotechnology. So to bring them together is the difficulty.
What about technology in general then, beyond nanotech? When does what we've been talking about today, as far as the growing of plant material, become a technology and almost an information and device technology business rather than a farming business? And I'll come to you, Henry, in a sec. I see you've got an answer too.
Yeah, well, you have to keep in mind, you always need to know what a plant is doing. For instance, in the vertical farming case, you have to realize that a leaf of lettuce is quite expensive coming out of these vertical farms at the moment. So you need to look at where you can make it more efficient to drive the price down. If you know what the plant needs, then you can do that more efficiently than if you know only what the lettuce is producing from a line point of view. But in my view, it makes good sense to use the sun as much as possible and to use the LEDs as additional lighting to change the properties of products.
Yep.
And there again, you are a farmer and you need to know what your consumers want from your product. And that is, I think, the role of the farmer, to translate what the consumers want from a product. That is not something that the technology can do.
What about you, Henry? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree that I don't think that everything needs to be grown in vertical farms. I think that you should maximize sunlight where possible. But I think that leafy greens, for example, that are coming from California to New York City, that doesn't make much sense to me at all. I think if you can grow them in a vertical farm nearby, why not do that?
So is that better for the consumer? If you can buy greens that were grown in New York City and eaten in New York City, is that going to be better?
I mean, it's obvious, right? Why would you buy something that's 5 to 7 days old with a leafy green that's mostly a water product anyway? So there's no reason to kind of have it shipped that long. Why would you do that when you could get something that was harvested yesterday or the morning of? And so the future of leafy green production is definitely vertical farms. The economics are already adding up, and that's just the future for it.
There's a lot of roof space that's empty in urban areas at the moment. What about vertical farms that are still horizontal? They just happen to be 30 stories above.
Yeah, there's a number of companies like Gotham Green, Sky Vegetables, and Loofah Farms that are farming rooftops with greenhouses. It's a very exciting approach because it is an unused space and you can get those spaces at a deal. But what we found is that the economics for those are very challenging. Rooftop greenhouses are very expensive because you have to build them out of glass. You have to make sure that they're wind structurally sound, so they're much more expensive than on-ground greenhouses. Furthermore, the permitting for them is difficult. So if you're going to do a rooftop greenhouse, you're looking at least 40,000 square feet before you can get to economic viability. Anything under that, our models have shown you're really not going to be getting the economies of scale.
Right, so that means it's a building that's going to be a wider building rather than a skyscraper as such. Before I come to you, back to you, Frans, Michael, if somebody came to you with a proposal that looked like that, how seriously would you take it at the moment?
Not very.
Why is that?
I think the main problem is that from a venture investing perspective, the great strength of vertical farming, which is growing locally and producing locally, works against it from an investor perspective, because what we're looking for is something that will have broad appeal and you'll be able to replicate it in other areas very easily. There's fairly low, apart from the capital costs, there's fairly low barriers to entry. Local players tend to develop locally. So being able to scale and replicate numerous versions to create a big company that's going to get you a 10x return.
That's interesting. Do you see a franchise model? That can make a big company.
Potentially.
Yeah. Now, Frans, you've been very patient and hanging on there. What thoughts have you got?
Yeah, virtually the same. But I would like to comment on the distance aspect. Of course, it doesn't make sense to transport lettuce from California to New York. But why not have greenhouses on the outskirts of New York? What is wrong with that?
Well, I don't know. Henry's got a thought. He wants that microphone.
Yeah, as I said, I think if you're growing vine crops or cucumbers or anything like that, you would want to grow them in greenhouses. And what we need is a more segmented agricultural industry where leafy greens and microgreens are grown in vertical farms, vine crops are grown in greenhouses around the city, and the crops that make sense to grow in soil are grown in soil. I don't think that you're going to be growing tomatoes or cucumbers in vertical farms anytime soon. But I do think that growing lettuce in a greenhouse is not the most economically viable choice either.
All right. Well, it's nice to see that we don't have total agreement up on the stage. So I'm going to pose one that might be a little bit more challenging. Given the way technology is moving, given that we're right down into the DNA structure, you showed us as an example how you can read the genetic code. When will we get to the stage we don't need to grow food, we just print it?
Well, you have to realize that 3D printing of food already takes place, but you have to have the ingredients and the base materials to do that from, and they are usually still biologically based. So you have to grow the raw materials, make them into something that you can print, and then print a very intricate structure that is. And there are examples of people taking apart a carrot, for instance, taking out some of the molecules that trigger allergic reactions, and then print it back into the form of a carrot again to give people in a hospital the experience of a carrot.
Except it'd be perfectly cylindrical, and all the right size so that
Well,
every slice is going to be identical?
whatever you want, because 3D printing can be any shape that you want.
Certainly appeals to my half Japanese heritage. Have you seen the way they do boiled eggs sometimes in 2 cylinders so that every slice is exactly the same? They separate the yolk and the white, cook it, and then reassemble it into a very long egg. That sounds like the sort of thing, but what about the others? I've heard that you can take seaweed, take the nutrients out, and it won't be long till we're printing steak or a steak substitute.
Well, they're already doing that.
Yeah, we are in Wageningen. We are working on meat replacers, as we call them.
So what I read as being it's coming is already here. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So I'm going to pose the question again. I'll ask you to try and answer this one, Henry. When are we going to get to the stage where those vertical farms are just manufacturing facilities, they're printing facilities as such? Do we get that? And this is the challenge for when we talk about innovation with a group of people in the room, or we're always going to have a requirement for premium real food.
I think the vertical farms right now already are manufacturing facilities, and I think a lot of consumers react to it that way. They say it's unnatural, and I disagree with that for a number of reasons. I think that agriculture has never been natural. The minute we started farming, we engaged in something that was unnatural, and we have to have some realities about our population growth and climate change, and so I think our choices are relatively limited. And certainly I think that vertical farms will grow more than leafy greens in the future, and certainly mushroom production, insect production, and meat production will be part of that. I don't mean meat production through animals, but I mean synthetic meat production.
All right, and one last point, Frans?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think vertical farms are a very good way of producing very high quality food. But whether we think food produced in these kinds of under technological circumstances are natural enough, or whether the consumer believes that they are artificial, so it's the perspective of in the end, it's the perspective of the consumer that makes the difference.
All right. Well, I know that lettuce tastes like lettuce to me wherever it's grown. Would you join me, ladies and gentlemen, in thanking Henry Gordon-Smith, Michael Dean, and Frans Kampers? Thank you.